Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to AI Talk. I'm your host, Astro, and today we have a very special guest. He's a seasoned storyteller, a comedian with a knack for engaging narratives, and an unabashed supporter of former President Donald Trump. Please join me in welcoming Jack, the narrator Carson. Jack, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Astro. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy a good conversation, especially when it comes to politics and where our country is heading.
Absolutely. Today, we're diving into a topic that's been making waves: the shifting support among Black American voters toward Donald Trump and away from the Democratic Party. It's a phenomenon that's caught many by surprise. Let's start with the basics, Jack. Why do you think this shift is happening?
Well, Astro, it's a multifaceted issue, but at its core, it boils down to disillusionment and a search for real change. Historically, the Democratic Party has been the go-to for Black voters, primarily because of the civil rights movement and the promises of social justice. But if you look closely, many feel that these promises have been just that, promises without substantial follow-through.
Interesting point. Can you give us some historical context to better understand this shift?
Sure, let's go back to the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were landmark legislations that shifted Black voters en masse to the Democratic Party. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. were pivotal in this movement, and the Democratic Party was seen as the party of progress. However, as decades passed, many Black Americans started to feel that the promised economic and social advancements weren't materializing. Urban areas with large Black populations, often governed by Democrats, saw rising crime rates, poor education systems, and lack of economic opportunities. Fast forward to the 1990s and 2000s, and we see continued struggles despite having Black leaders in prominent positions, like President Barack Obama. The hope was that an Obama presidency would bring about significant change, but many feel that the tangible improvements in their daily lives were minimal.
So you're suggesting that this shift is a response to unmet expectations?
Exactly. When Trump came onto the scene in 2016, he brought a message of economic empowerment, law and order, and a disdain for political correctness, which resonated with a segment of the Black community. They saw him as someone who could actually shake up the status quo. And it's not just rhetoric. Under Trump, we saw policies like the First Step Act, which aimed at criminal justice reform, something that directly impacts Black communities. The Opportunity Zones created under the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act were designed to spur economic development in distressed areas, many of which have significant Black populations.
Those are concrete examples. But some might argue that Trump's rhetoric and some of his policies were divisive and even harmful to minority communities. How do you reconcile that with his increasing support?
That's a great question. Trump's style is definitely controversial and not everyone's cup of tea. But for many Black supporters, it's about looking past the personality and focusing on the policies. Let's talk about economic numbers. Before the pandemic, Black unemployment was at a historic low. Wages were rising, and there was a sense of economic optimism that hadn't been felt in years. Moreover, there's a growing sentiment that the Democratic Party takes the Black vote for granted. There's this expectation that Black Americans will vote Democrat no matter what, which leads to complacency. Trump, on the other hand, actively campaigned for the Black vote, addressing issues that matter to them, even if his approach was unorthodox.
What about the conspiracy theories that circulate within some pro-Trump circles? Do you think they play a role in shaping opinions?
Conspiracy theories do play a role, though it's not exclusive to pro-Trump circles. People from all political spectrums buy into conspiracies when they feel disenfranchised or when mainstream narratives don't align with their experiences. For instance, the idea that the Democratic Party is manipulating Black communities to keep them dependent on government aid is a prevalent theory among some Trump supporters. They argue that this dependency keeps Black voters in a perpetual state of poverty and disenfranchisement. While these ideas are controversial and heavily debated, they resonate with those who feel stuck in a cycle of poverty and see no real improvement.
Let's dig a little deeper into those sentiments. How do they manifest in the daily lives of Black Americans who are turning to Trump?
For many, it's about seeing through the promises and looking for tangible results. Take school choice, for example. Black parents in underperforming school districts often support school vouchers and charter schools because they offer an escape from failing public schools. Trump was a vocal advocate for school choice, positioning it as a civil rights issue of our time. Another aspect is criminal justice reform. The First Step Act, which I mentioned earlier, was a significant piece of legislation that many Black Americans saw as a positive step. It reduced mandatory minimum sentences and offered better rehabilitation programs, addressing systemic issues in the justice system. Then there's the economic perspective. Under Trump's administration, there were tax incentives for businesses in opportunity zones, encouraging investments in underserved communities. This policy aimed to create jobs and stimulate local economies, something many Black Americans found appealing.
These are significant points, Jack. How do you respond to those who say that Trump's approach, particularly his language and handling of racial issues, has been detrimental to racial harmony in the country?
It's undeniable that Trump's rhetoric can be polarizing, and it has indeed sparked heated debates. However, many of his supporters argue that his bluntness and refusal to adhere to political correctness are refreshing. They see it as a sign of authenticity rather than divisiveness. For example, Trump's stance on illegal immigration was controversial, but some Black Americans appreciated his tough approach because they felt that illegal immigration undercuts wages and job opportunities for low-income workers, including Black Americans. It's a complex issue where economic concerns intersect with national policy. Furthermore, Trump's outreach efforts, like his visits to inner cities and meetings with Black leaders, showed a willingness to engage directly with the community. While not all his actions or words were perfect, many felt that he was at least addressing their issues head-on, something they didn't always feel from the Democratic establishment.
Let's talk about the current landscape. As we head into the 2024 elections, how do you see this shift playing out? Are there any indicators that suggest this trend will continue or even grow?
The 2024 elections will be telling. Several indicators suggest this trend could continue. For instance, the results from the 2020 election showed an increase in the percentage of Black men voting for Trump compared to 2016. Polls and studies have indicated a growing disillusionment with the Democratic Party among younger Black voters. Also, there's the Biden administration's performance. Many Black voters are scrutinizing his policies and their impact. Issues like inflation, crime rates, and education continue to be pressing concerns. If these areas don't see significant improvement, the frustration could drive more Black voters to consider alternatives, including Trump or other Republican candidates. Moreover, social media and independent Black voices are increasingly influential. Platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and podcasts provide spaces where conservative Black voices can share their perspectives, often countering the mainstream narrative. Influencers like Candace Owens, Larry Elder, and others have significant followings and can sway public opinion.
It sounds like you're suggesting that media and independent voices play a crucial role in this shift. Can you elaborate on how these platforms are changing the conversation?
Absolutely. Traditional media has often been accused of having a liberal bias, which can alienate conservative Black voices. Social media platforms and independent media have given these voices a megaphone. For example, Candace Owens has built a massive following by speaking directly to Black Americans about issues like economic empowerment, personal responsibility, and skepticism towards Democratic policies. Her message resonates because it challenges the narrative that the Democratic Party is the only viable option for Black voters. These platforms also allow for direct engagement. Black conservatives can share their personal stories, offer critiques, and propose solutions in a way that's unfiltered and authentic. This has a powerful impact, as people are more likely to trust and relate to individuals who share their background and experiences. Additionally, these voices often highlight historical and current examples that challenge the status quo. For instance, they might discuss the economic impact of the 1994 crime bill, which was supported by many Democrats and had devastating effects on Black communities. By bringing these issues to the forefront, they encourage a reevaluation of long-held political loyalties.
Jack, you've touched on some compelling points. As we wrap up this first part of our conversation, what do you think are the most significant factors driving this political realignment among Black voters?
The most significant factors include economic opportunities, education, and criminal justice reform. Black voters are increasingly looking for policies that deliver tangible benefits and improve their daily lives. They're scrutinizing both parties' records and promises more critically than ever before. Disillusionment with the Democratic Party's track record in urban areas and the appeal of Trump's economic policies are major drivers. The influence of independent black voices and the ability to bypass traditional media filters also play a crucial role. Ultimately, it comes down to a desire for real change and empowerment. Black Americans are weighing their options and choosing the path they believe will lead to a better future for themselves and their communities. This political realignment is a sign of a dynamic and evolving electorate, and it will be fascinating to see how it shapes the upcoming elections.
Jack, thank you for sharing your insights. This has been a deep dive into a complex and evolving issue. I look forward to continuing our conversation in the next part of this series. For our listeners, stay tuned as we explore more on this topic in the next segment of AI Talk.